1964, a new U.S. strategy began to unfold in Vietnam. It was written in the vapor trails that crossed the Pacific sky. Vapor trails that began at air bases in the Pacific, at tactical air command bases in the United States. Vapor trails formed by sleek Air Force jets, muscle to build up our air strength. The situation made it imperative that we be ready to strike back. This was the United States Air Force, showing the versatility that was to make it such a vital factor in the Vietnam theater. Air-to-air refueling made it possible to deploy aircraft swiftly and efficiently. Soon, F-100 Super Sabres were setting down on the runways at Da Nang and Tan Son Nhut, while 2 squadrons of twin-jet B-57s went to Bien Hoa. The buildup of U.S. air power was underway. The buildup included the many additional services that must accompany a fighter-bomber force. More troops and cargo carriers. More rescue aircraft. More gear. More maintenance men. More equipment. More munitions. Expanded communications facilities and new air bases. But the jets were not to see action right away. For a time, the situation remained relatively static. Then, the communists blew the lid off, literally. Bien Hoa. Pleiku. Quy Nhon. Tan Son Nhut. Saigon. These direct attacks against U.S. forces, together with the growing number of atrocities committed by the Viet Cong, caused the U.S. to take a long, hard look at Vietnam. What it saw was ominous. The enemy roamed almost at will in the dense jungles, using tactics learned in almost 20 years of unceasing guerrilla warfare. The same tactics that had cost the French 100,000 casualties and sent them down to final defeat at Dien Bien Phu in 1954. The Viet Cong controlled much of South Vietnamese territory into which they moved in men and supplies, virtually unhampered, along a vast logistic network, the notorious Ho Chi Minh Trail. It was obvious that without massive assistance, South Vietnam would fall, and it would be only a matter of time until all of Southeast Asia would be faced with the prospect of a communist invasion. Only hours after the Pleiku attack, the National Security Council passed a resolution authorizing airstrikes in North Vietnam. Within 2 days, U.S. airmen and pilots of the fledgling South Vietnamese Air Force launched strikes against military targets north of the demilitarized zone. Soon afterward, in a companion action, Air Force jets at Tan Son Nhut, Da Nang, and Bien Hoa were unleashed in South Vietnam. There were now, in fact, 2 air wars underway in embattled Vietnam. North of the 17th parallel, the emphasis was on cutting supply lines. South of the parallel, the action was more varied, but close air support of ground forces received the major effort. Now, the pace of the buildup redoubled. Additional squadrons of aircraft were deployed to Vietnam in a trans-Pacific migration of unprecedented scale. New airfields sprang into being with amazing speed. New launch bases for the ever-growing swarm of military aircraft. New logistics bases for the increasing demands of our ground forces. 69 days after the start of construction, operational aircraft began landing at Cam Ranh Bay. The interim facilities, built on a sandy coastal peninsula, now house a tactical fighter wing, an aerial port, and a vast logistics complex. Phan Rang is the home of another tactical fighter wing. These are but a few of the many primary, secondary, and P-patch air facilities hustled into existence in response to the need for more air power. Built by methods unique to our military engineers, much of this construction will be of permanent use to the Vietnamese people. Administration of the rapidly growing aerial armada was already well established. Pacific Air Forces, the air element of the Unified Pacific Command, is responsible for directing and supporting the bulk of Air Force activities in the Pacific. The hub of this vast command is headquartered at Hickam Air Force Base, Hawaii, linked to the Vietnam Theater of Operations by an ultra-modern communication system, keeping the PACAF commander abreast of happenings throughout the Pacific. This Air Force-operated communications network not only ties PACAF headquarters to its Pacific air bases and the United States mainland, but also allows for direct contact between this control center at Hickam and strike aircraft. Thus, a strike force headed for a North Vietnamese target is enmeshed in a communications web, the heart of which is the on-scene command in South Vietnam, located at Tan Son Nhut Air Base, headquarters of the U.S. 7th Air Force. Here, the result of the air power buildup is very much in evidence.
Good morning, sir. On 27 February...
While overall direction of Air Force operations in the Pacific is normally handled by PACAF headquarters, the 7th Air Force commander and his staff are responsible for the tactical forces employed in the Vietnam combat theater.
U.S. Marine Corps.
Because Tan Son Nhut is frequently within earshot of the falling bombs, the cold facts of the regular briefings take on an added significance.
Was a ground report. In Tally-Ho, 101 sorties were flown. The 53 add-ons were 32 F-105s, 4 F-4Cs, and 17 U.S. Navy aircraft from out-country resources.
The figures are constantly changing. At this moment, they are about to be updated.
Dave, I've got our final IP at 12 o'clock, 5 miles.
The combined U.S. and Vietnamese Air Force's Tactical Air Control Center at Tan Son Nhut Airfield provides the 7th Air Force commander with a system for centralized control of his air resources, geared for quick response to all requirements. Detailed control is delegated to the direct air support centers which direct all air activity in their respective areas.
Tally-Ho, I've got the target at 1 o'clock. Roger.
Control of air activity over the extremely fluid battlefronts in Vietnam is given added flexibility by the airborne battlefield command control centers now being used. The heart of the system is a boxcar-sized package of communications and observation gear, which fits readily into a C-130 aircraft for airborne operations, or can be flown into a forward area and set up on the ground in 3 hours or less. The ABCCC is a versatile performer. Among its capabilities are the direction of joint air-ground operations, control of direct air support, the provision of airborne communications during special strikes, and command of air rescue activities. It can also serve as an alternate command post when fixed command facilities are under attack or when other communications break down. Air superiority is a decisive factor in prosecuting a successful war. And the first requirement for air superiority is control of the air, which includes protection of our own air bases from enemy air attack. The communists have not yet mounted such an attack, though they have that capability. Should they ever attempt to do so, we have the air defenses to deal with them. Jet fighters are constantly on an alert status at bases in South Vietnam. Powerful radars search the sky, and reconnaissance aircraft keep a wary eye on enemy airfields in the north. If the enemy should make an offensive move, the reaction would be swift. Within minutes, the interceptors are on their way. In the instances over North Vietnam where Red MiGs have challenged them, our aircraft and air crews have proven to be vastly superior. Target selection at the national level requires accurate intelligence, and much of this responsibility is borne by reconnaissance aircraft. Air Force jets carry supersonic eyes and ears over enemy territory, obtaining weather information as well as target selection, pre-strike and bomb damage assessment photography. Our B-66 pilots also served as pathfinders for strike aircraft attacking targets in the north. The RF-4C is the newest Air Force reconnaissance aircraft. It is equipped for day and night photography, radar mapping, and other important functions. Nothing is immune from the prying cameras. Not even the enemy's ground-to-air missile sites, where the blinding speed of these supersonic jets flying at low levels catches the Reds napping. The conduct of this type of air war involves much more than bombing and strafing attacks, particularly in the guerrilla environment we are facing in Vietnam. One tactic the enemy has used to great advantage is the ambush. From hiding places in the dense forests, he has been able to spring deadly traps on Allied troops and convoys, and then vanish into the jungle like the drops of a monsoon rain. This kind of attack is being made increasingly difficult by spraying a non-toxic type of weed killer on the jungle growth bordering Special Forces camps, important road routes, and likely ambush areas. One small group of Air Force pilots is fighting another kind of warfare, the battle for men's minds. Their only weapons are 2 loudspeakers, a tape recorder, and bundles of multicolored leaflets. The leaflets and the voice broadcasts are designed to influence the Viet Cong and their sympathizers to defect. Some warn civilians to leave a military target area scheduled for attack. The value of these psychological warfare missions can be judged by the hot ground fire that greets the tiny unarmed U-10 aircraft, and by the many defectors who turn up following each flight. The Viet Cong are noted for their primitive resourcefulness, but the enemy holds no copyright on improvisation. Yankee ingenuity is also at work in this war. The old C-47, known to pilots around the world as the cargo and troop-carrying Goonie Bird, has been reincarnated as a dragon ship with a truly fearful bite. Equipped with 3 6-barreled Gatling guns, each capable of firing up to 6,000 rounds per minute, one AC-47 can tear acres of jungle into a tossed green salad in no time at all. Air supremacy is of particular benefit to air rescue crews, who have saved several hundred downed airmen since the war began. With possibility of attacks from the air reduced, crews can concentrate on the mission at hand. A smoke marker, a radio signal, a dye stain in the sea. These are the clues that lead the rescue team to the sea. crew works fast and efficiently. The elements and the enemy are grim contenders for the life of the downed man. Assault airlift forces have made indispensable contributions to the Allied effort in Vietnam. Since only 20% of the roads in the South are under government control, airlift has become the civil and military lifeline. Airborne assault. Airdrops of munitions and supplies to inaccessible areas. Deliveries to remote areas. Evacuation of the wounded. Relocation of refugees are daily combat support missions. Long-range, high-speed strategic airlift forces move high-priority material, personnel, and complete units across the Pacific to the battlefront. An Army Brigade task force was airlifted from Hawaii to Pleiku in Vietnam. The movement involved approximately 3,000 troops and 5,000 tons of equipment, airlifted over a 6,000-mile route, averaging one departure or arrival every 2 hours and 45 minutes during the period of deployment. Troops airlifted by the giant jet transports can be ready to engage the enemy within mere hours after they leave their bases, even distant bases. But air mobility pays off in many other ways. It not only gets the troops there, it helps them to stay there. In the South, there are no well-defined battle lines. The enemy hits and runs. As often as not, he looks and dresses exactly like the friendlies, and his attacks are vicious. This kind of warfare calls for a heavy reliance on air support. Very close air support. Has called on some of its most experienced pilots to act as air liaison officers and forward air controllers. Flying over the hottest action in pint-sized O-1E Bird Dog aircraft and from ground positions in radio-equipped jeeps, their performance has become one of the fabled stories of the war.
3-5, you to left end orbit? Negative, let's go straight ahead. I'll go to a left end orbit now. Okay, we got you inside. Okay, keep me inside and I'll go up here and I'll mark the target whenever you're ready. I'd like the first bomb just north of my smoke, about 100 meters. That's just a couple different widths. Okay. 3-5, we got any friendlies in the area? Roger, nearest friendlies are 2,000 meters to the west. Okay. You still have my smoke? I got your smoke still, right. Let them do and set them up hot in pairs. Roger. That looks pretty good. I'd like you to keep your paths as steep as possible and be especially vigilant for helicopters.
The forward air controllers live and work with the Vietnamese and with U.S. ground forces in the field. They become thoroughly familiar with the local people and with the countryside in their assigned area. They fly daily reconnaissance missions, and they direct airstrikes from first-hand knowledge of the conditions that exist under the screen of jungle foliage. So accurate is their guidance that hard-pressed ground commanders often ask for airstrikes within mere yards of their own lines. Should darkness cloud the issue, the FAC has another trick up his sleeve. He calls for a flare mission, and within minutes, help is on the way. Like cosmic searchlights, brilliant 750,000 candle power flares drift eerily earthward, depriving the attackers of the cover of night and lighting the way for the fighter bombers. The giant B-52 has also been used effectively against Viet Cong troop and supply strongholds throughout South Vietnam. The air war in the north is far removed from the mud, sweat, and blood of the ground fighting, but it is no less savage. Here, slamming speed is the keynote, and aerial interdiction the main objective. Interdiction, by definition, to prohibit. In war, it means attacking the enemy's lines and sources of supply. Purpose? To starve his fighting forces by denying them food, arms, reinforcements. The steady pressure of aerial interdiction in the north is not only blunting the point of the offensive in the south, it is inexorably weakening the whole economy of the communist north. Fighters and bombers are logging thousands of strike sorties each month, dropping thousands of tons of bombs on bridges, ferries, roads, railway lines, highways and tunnels, troop staging areas, munition depots, missile sites, fuel storage depots, and many other strategic targets. On June 29, 1966, the shape of the war in the north assumed a new dimension. The long arm of U.S. air power reached into the very heart of communist North Vietnam when U.S. Air Force planes delivered a message from the free nations supporting the cause of the beleaguered South Vietnamese. The message echoed the words of our president. Quote, "The air attacks on military targets in North Vietnam have imposed and will continue to impose a growing burden and a high price on those who wage war against the freedom of others. Our purpose is to convince North Vietnam that this kind of aggression is too costly and cannot succeed. Until the day they decide to end this aggression and to make an honorable peace, we will carry on." End quote. Modern air power accuracy makes pinpoint bombing of military targets possible. It makes possible the wrecking of the Red War machine and the strangling of the communist economy. The President has left no doubt in the minds of friend or enemy that the new pattern of persuasion will continue until the North Vietnamese come to the conference table. The United States Air Force, Navy, Army, and Marine Corps are investing their power, experience, and determination behind this objective. It is answering the communist challenge in the only way the ruthless enemy can understand, by setting an intolerable price on his effort to prolong the fight. This is the Air Force contribution to victory in Vietnam, and